He's doing whistleblowing without realizing he's a whistleblower.
It's a big story in America how much we pay for insurance. It's just been shooting up over the years.
What would 90 pills cost at your pharmacy?
90-day supply, 90 of those tablets is $13.83 at my pharmacy.
For 180 pills, your cash cost is $96. But Medicare's paying $3,400 for 90 pills. Oh, so you don't take any insurance at all at your pharmacy?
Yeah, and that's one of the keys, is if I took insurance, I wouldn't be able to charge this price. In the U.S., we don't pay for drugs. We don't pay for health care. We pay for insurance.
They all control the entire supply chains. Good morning. This is Dr. Joe Piacentile. The podcast is American Whistleblowers. And today I've got as a guest Brad Hart, who is a pharmacist out of Fort Worth, Texas. Brad and his wife Glenda are both pharmacists and opened up the Forest Park Pharmacy. Is that the correct name, Brad?
Yes, sir.
Forest Park Pharmacy in Fort Worth, Texas, about 2 years ago. And I bumped into Brad. I don't think he's doing whistleblowing without realizing he's a whistleblower. And there's 100,000 followers online, and he's just really saying some amazing things that I find courageous. And I think the government needs to listen to this fella. I've been doing this work for 30 years. And in 2 years, Brad, you've been able to get the message out in 2 years more than I have in 30 years. And it's amazing. The things that ever since we talked, I started going to all of your social media sites, and you're everywhere, right? You're everywhere. You're on Facebook, you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you're on every platform that there is. You're getting a lot of followers because you speak the truth. You're authentic. And the things that you have to say about the crazy pricing in this country, it's from your lips to Donald Trump's ears, because he's talking about the evils of PBMs. And that's what he called them, that there were middlemen driving up the price of drugs in this country. And it's a major problem. And I don't think most of America even knows what a PBM is. You do. I do. I did one of the first PBM cases in America back in 2001 against the Medco Corporation. But I really want to tell your story, and I'm fascinated. Can you tell us where you went to school and how you settled in Texas, and you and your wife, did you go to school together? Can you just tell me how you sort of came to be, how the Forest Park Pharmacy even got started?
Yeah. So my wife and I both have music education degrees, actually.
How cool.
And yeah, she, towards the end of the degree, she realized that wasn't for her. Once she got out into teaching, she realized she didn't want to do it. So we looked for a new profession. We just kind of scrolled through, what are the good jobs that are like 9 to 5 that pay well, and pharmacists.
What was the music degree in? Could I ask?
Education.
Right, but do you guys play instruments?
Yeah. We're both percussionists. We met doing this thing called drum corps. It's like marching band, but like independent. It travels around the country. It's really cool. But we actually met in Chicago, even though we're both from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because of that event. So it was pretty neat.
You were a national drum corps competitor.
Yeah.
I'm actually very aware of that, believe it or not. My wife's cousin was in that for years. And my wife and I are both My wife and I both play instruments, and
wow.
I made a living. I was in the New York local 802. That's how I put myself through school, playing. So it's interesting. A lot of people in healthcare started that way. Mm-hmm. So all right, so you and Glenda met doing drum corps, and what happened?
Well, so towards the end of her degree, she realized that it wasn't for her. So we found that other job. We decided pharmacist was a good one, and we just dove in. She started applying for school. She needed a couple extra classes to get into pharmacy school. And then we moved to Lubbock, got her degree out there, moved back to DFW, and she started working. She did just normal retail. She was at Target when it was before it was CVS. They're a CVS now, but it used to be just Target Pharmacy. And then she went to Albertsons, Tom Thumb. She's been at all those. But over time, I think 10 years, she never got a raise. Like no raises happened over that time. And that's a pay cut if you go 10 years without a raise. So we just realized that if we wanted to, continue to grow, then we needed to do our own thing. So we decided to open up Forest Park Pharmacy and dive in.
So Forest Park Pharmacy, and that's in Fort Worth, Texas. Where in Fort Worth is that, please?
We're right next to the zoo, TCU, that area.
TCU, Texas.
Yep. Christian University.
Texas Christian University. Okay. And so you're next to the Texas Christian University. You've been open your own pharmacy store now with your wife for 2 years.
Yep.
And tell me your story, because this is just unbelievable how you go from that, which is pretty modest aspiration, and you just want to have this successful little pharmacy, and then you start running into some brick walls, and now you're a national spokesperson for pharmacies. And how does that happen in 2 years? That's an amazing story.
Yeah. So when we opened, our plan was to just be a little local, independent neighborhood pharmacy. And we thought we could do that just would accept all insurance and just be able to help everybody. Whatever the problems were with insurance, we thought that it would have been like dealing with paperwork or phone calls or whatever, all that type of stuff. So we took all insurance plans, helped everybody we could. And then in the first 4 months, after we had been open for 4 months, we looked at our profit loss and realized that we were getting paid 2% less than the cost of the medication. So not only was it not paying for our salary or the electric bill or the rent, it wasn't even paying for the cost of the drugs. They were paying less than it cost us to buy the drugs. And that was
when
just
you say they, okay, now when you say they were paying you less than the cost of the drug, who's they in this story?
That's the insurance companies, the PBMs across the board. This is a bunch of PBMs, not just the big three, all PBMs across the board.
And
now they have different scales.
And for the audience's sake, a PBM is a pharmacy benefit manager. These are companies that are middlemen that insert themselves between you and your healthcare plan and the pharmacy, and they manage the drugs that you have access to. Supposedly, to lower costs, but in reality, they've become a giant cartel and have integrated. They own pharmacies, they're owned by drug companies. And from the independent pharmacist perspective, the reason why you're not seeing a lot of independent pharmacies out there anymore, where that was a real part of American society, is because of the story you're about to hear. You couldn't ask for nicer people than Brad and his wife. You couldn't ask for a better location, Fort Worth, Texas. Somebody should be able to open up a pharmacy, go to work, put on the white coat, make a living, and do good things for people. And then somehow you find out that you're getting reimbursed less than the actual cost of the drugs. How is that even possible?
Right. Yeah. So what is happening where somebody's paying insurance, and it's a big story in America how much we pay for insurance. It's just been shooting up over the years. Since 2012, you can look at what people are paying, and it's just skyrocketing. I think that an individual is paying $9,000 a year right now, and a family, it's up to like $24,000 on average. So we are paying out the nose for health insurance. And what we expect to happen is when we get healthcare coverage, we go to see our doctor, we expect that our insurance actually pays that person for the service. And then maybe there's some markup on the back end, and that's part of what's causing it. But we expect that they actually pay for it, at least that. But that's not what happens. They actually were not even paying for the prescription. And the reason that they do that, just like you said, is because they own pharmacies. So they want to be able to direct all pharmacy prescriptions to their own individually owned pharmacies where they could pay themselves some outrageous prices that they don't pay anybody else.
So when you open your pharmacy, do you enter into a contract with each separate PBM? How do these prices get set?
Yeah, so each there's a large group or like group organization that you could sign up for that puts you in a lot of them, but the big ones you have to do individually. And the problem with these contracts is you should be able to negotiate. Like if I said, "Oh, I don't like this rate," I would do it for this rate, and then we could find our way there. That's not how it works. These are take it or leave it. I can either choose to accept their terms or I can not be contracted. And that wouldn't be a problem, except 90% of America is insured. So if you don't take insurance as an independent pharmacy, you basically can't serve anybody. And that's what we found. We dumped all the contracts and we lost most of our business overnight.
Okay. So how do you survive that?
Well, that's what's interesting. So, like I said, we lost most of our business. 70% of our customers gone within a month, but our profit doubled. we lost 70%, doubled our profit, and that's because they were paying us so terribly. But the thing that allows us to continue to operate is that they were so greedy that they've actually made people's copays higher than the cost of the medication. So they claim to cover a prescription, then they charge a copay, but the copay is over the costs necessary even for a pharmacy to operate. So I'm able to beat the insurance copay prices on nearly half of drugs, which allows us to continue to offer really good deals for people, even though they have insurance.
Can you just give us one example? Because it just seems what you said just now, and it's worth repeating, that you can sell a drug to the public for cash out of pocket for less than that person would pay for the copay if it was covered by insurance. Now, that would include Medicare. I'm assuming the Medicare plans as well.
Oh yeah, any plan. Yeah, and virtually.
Can you walk us through an example?
I mean, one of the big ones is rosuvastatin. That one has a really bad copay for a lot of people. It depends on the specific plans, really. But like I said, half of plans half of prescriptions probably were going to be cheaper than the copay only. Now, there's back end stuff. That's where my prices get really crazy.
Rosuvastatin, right there in my drawer. So,
yep.
Okay, so my rosuvastatin, let's stay with rosuvastatin. This is 40 milligrams. I take one a day.
Mm-hmm.
What's your price for 30 tabs of this?
30 tabs will probably be around $11, $12. But where we really save people money is like on a 90-day, because what we do is we have a $10 fee to fill. So if you do a 30-day, it might cost you, whatever, $11.30 or something. But if you do a 90-day, all that you're adding is that cost of the medication, which is like 89 cents. So a 90-day would cost you like $13.
Rosuvastatin. So let's stay with this example. Rosuvastatin is a statin. It lowers the cholesterol in your body. Half of America is taking one, right? Mm-hmm. 90 pills. They're 40 milligrams each. What would 90 pills cost at your pharmacy?
Yeah. So let me just pull it up, actually, since we're getting specific here.
I'd like to see the actual numbers.
Yeah. We got a price checker on our website, which is a huge tool. You can just go right there and see exactly what
is your website address?
Forest Park Pharmacy. Yeah, Forest Park
Pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay, so for the 40 milligram, let's say, a 90-day supply, 90 of those tablets is $13.83 at my pharmacy.
Wait, so I can buy 90 tablets of rosuvastatin, a 3-month supply for how much?
$13.83.
$13.83. That's all I have to give you, less than $14, and I have 90 days of rosuvastatin.
That's right.
Now, if I'm on Medicare, what does Medicare pay, and what's my copay for 90 days?
Medicare. Now, rosuvastatin's a wild one. Hold on, I got my list right here. Where is it? Okay, so for Medicare, they're paying $28.55 for rosuvastatin for a 90-day. So they're paying a little over twice as much. And this is a super common drug. So for that drug in particular, they're spending $1.2 billion a year on that. And that means that they're wasting.
If they bought it from your pharmacy, retail, they'd save about half of that.
Exactly. $670 million they'd save if they were paying our cost. And that's a very modest one. That's a very common, very modest.
I hope
they're only
Dr. Oz is listening. Much. Dr. Oz is the new head of CMS.
Yes.
I'm a medical doc. You're a pharmacist. It used to be an easy relationship. I would prescribe. People would go to the pharmacist. You'd fill it, scripts. You'd call me if there was a problem. If a patient wasn't taking her meds on time, I would literally get a phone call from my pharmacist. I knew him. He knew me. They knew my patients. And now today you go to CVS, they're filling 1,000 prescriptions a day. Everybody is on 5 and 6 meds. And you just showed me that Medicare is paying twice as much for a Suvastatin. Mm-hmm. So if I was a Medicare patient, and Medicare allows how much for these same 90 pills? You're saying about $28?
Yeah.
And my copay with Medicare would be
depending on you. Yeah, depending on the thing.
$6.
It could be anywhere from 10 to 30. They've moved it around.
Okay. And so this is just one drug. You're looking at saving $600 million a year on one drug. There's hundreds of drugs like this. What are the can you cite another example? Because I know online I'm watching you come up with these examples, and they blew my mind. I called you because I saw this online. I said, I need to talk to this fella.
Yeah.
Give me another example. This is just unbelievable, actually.
Okay, yeah. So abiraterone, this is a big one.
Whoa. Say that 3 times slowly, because nobody in the audience is going to know what that is.
Yeah.
Abiraterone?
Abiraterone, yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. Let me pull it up here.
Just give me a hint. What does that drug do?
Okay. So abiraterone, cancer drug. Let's see. So they filled this prescription 440,000 times. This is just in 1 year, by the way. All these numbers only in 1 year.
This is a cancer drug. Is there a trade name on this drug?
I don't know. It's been generic for quite a while.
All right,
and that's what's crazy about these. Yeah. They're all
so
generics.
This is a generic drug. So the whole concept of a generic drug is we're supposed to save money on generics.
Yeah.
And how do you spell this drug?
Abiraterone.
Abiraterone. Okay, I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So abiraterone. Okay, and abiraterone. All right, so abiraterone is a drug used in combination with prednisone to treat a certain type of prostate cancer, correct?
Yep.
And I believe the trade name of this was Zytiga, Zytiga. So the brand name of this drug is Zytiga, but you're telling me now that there's a generic that's been out for a while, which is supposed to save everybody a lot of money. Prostate cancer is certainly a big issue. We know President Biden was just diagnosed with prostate cancer. So tell me about the cost of this drug, abiraterone.
So in 2022, they filled this drug 440,000 times. And each prescription, they were paying $3,400. So 440,000 times, 3,400 each time. So they spent 1.5
each prescription. And how often do you take this drug?
Daily.
Wait, so this drug. So each prescription, you're saying 3,400. Is that 3,400 a year?
No, per prescription. So this is like a monthly or 90 days. 90 days is what we compared it to. So probably a 90-day.
All right. So this is a 90-day. So this is $3,400 every 90 days.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
And $3,400 for 90 days supply. And this is the drug Zytiga.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the copay on that is going to be.
Oh, those are astronomical, because this is in the different category. This is in specialty drug category, which used to mean that a drug was hard to manage for the patient and they needed a lot of work with the pharmacy, or it had some kind of special shipping thing it needed, something special about it. Now it doesn't mean that. It just means it's expensive, basically. They've kind of cornered that market so that they're able to control these really expensive meds.
And what is that called? You're saying
specialty.
It's just a specialty drug?
Yeah.
Okay. But there's nothing special about there's nothing special about it except the cost.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a tablet. It just goes out. Yeah.
So $3,400 for 90 tablets. Is it one tablet a day?
No, I think we dispense 180 on each prescription.
All right. So 2 tablets a day.
Yeah.
So you take it twice a day for 90 days, 180 tablets, $3,400.
Yeah. So they're spending $1.5 billion on it every year across all prescriptions. Our price out the door is $96.
96 what?
$96.
Wait, so that's for a 90-day supply?
Yeah, 180 tablets.
For 180 pills, your cash cost is $96. Yep. But Medicare is paying $3,400 for 90 pills.
Yeah.
How is that humanly possible?
Right. It's insanity. Total insanity. So let's see, they're saving they could fill every prescription for $42 million. So instead of spending $1.5 billion, they could be spending $1.4 billion or $1,457,000 instead.
So let's stay with this example because people are going to hear this and they think it's not true, or they think that we're making it up, or that you're a crazy guy, but you're far from crazy. Actually, the system is crazy, right? I once described American healthcare to somebody that in Europe, they were asking about American healthcare, and I said, we have the best healthcare system in the world. Everybody in America should be able to get healthcare. We're the richest company. We have the best doctors, the best medications. So it's like a big coffee shop or cafe, because in Europe, they understand coffee. It's like a cafe. And you want everybody in the coffee shop to get a free cup of coffee. And we make the best cafe, and there's, 100 people in the coffee shop. Everybody should be able to get a cup of coffee for free. But the coffee in this shop costs $5,000 a cup. That's what's wrong with American healthcare. We have plenty of drugs. We have plenty of smart doctors. We have plenty of gadgets that diagnose you and do all those kind of things. But we also have a system that charges or pays $3,400 for a 90-day supply. $3,400 for a 90-day supply. That's 2 pills a day, is 180 pills. $3,400 that Medicare is paying for this drug, Zytiga, the generic version of that, which is called abiraterone, a biterone if you want. And you're telling me that in your Forest Park pharmacy in Fort Worth, Texas, I can walk in for $96 and walk out with the same bottle of pills that Uncle Sam is paying $3,400 for. Okay. Yep. Now, not every crook carries a gun. The biggest crooks in America carry pens and computers and typewriters and, laptops. Can we go into and understand, can you explain to me and to people listening to this how this is possible in the United States? Walk me through this prescription. Who's paying? How did this price come to be? What do the patients say when they come to your shop? And what kind of copay does a Medicare patient have to pay you? If I come in with my Medicare Part D card, right? D as in David, that's the Medicare that pays for all this. And I say, Dr. Brad, I've got a prescription here from my pharmacist, from my doctor, and I have Medicare. You're going to ring this up and you put Medicare into the computer. And what's going to pop up is what?
Well, we don't take any insurance, so I have no idea what you would have to pay at the counter. That's one of the.
So you don't take any insurance at all at your pharmacy?
Yeah, and that's one of the keys. Is if I took insurance, I wouldn't be able to charge this price, because in order to take insurance, I have to give them what's called a usual and customary price. That is like what I charge. But if my usual and customary price is too low, then they won't pay me anything. So they've made it where it's impossible for me to charge a fair price to a non-insurance customer and accept insurance at the same time. So the only reason I can offer low prices is because I've canceled all my contracts with insurance. So I can't even see what it would cost you to use insurance. I can't see if you have insurance.
So when you first decided not to accept insurances at your pharmacy, you lost 70+% of your business, but your profits went up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Where is that? And that was 2 years ago. Where is that today?
We got profitable pretty quickly after I first went viral about a year ago. And it kind of went everywhere. It was like bananas when I first had a video go viral. It totally broke my store for about 2 months. But yeah, we're doing okay now. And what's crazy is the reason I doubled my profit is because I was getting paid a fair amount on each prescription. If a prescription came in, I was making money. And as crazy as that is, that's not what was happening before. A prescription would come in and it would cost me money to dispense it. Um,
So you must know other pharmacists in Fort Worth who are still accepting insurance. How do they stay open if they're an independent pharmacy?
The only way that you can really continue to be profitable is to manipulate your patients. You have to look at their prescription profile, and if they have one that is going to lose you a lot of money, then you have to tell them that you're out of stock. And even if you're not out of stock, even if you could buy it, that's what you have to say, because the contracts stipulate that you can't refuse to fill a prescription for an insured patient based on your reimbursement. So the fact that they're underpaying me, I'm not allowed to use that as a reason to not fill it. So I can't say, oh, I'm sorry, your Ozempic is actually costing me $100 if I fill it, so I'm not going to fill this for you. I have to just say I'm out of stock, even if I can fill it for the next person right behind you. So that's what they're doing. They look at the prescription profile, and then they have to lie to their patients in order to manipulate so that they only get the prescriptions that are profitable to them.
So all of these well-intentioned independent pharmacists all around America, and there's still thousands of them, correct?
Oh, yeah.
They're lying to their patients. They're forced to say to their patients that they're out of stock, when in reality, they're not out of stock. It's just that if they fill that prescription, they can lose as much as $100. And let's talk about Ozempic for a second. That's a perfect example, right? Everybody knows what Ozempic is. It was compounded until recently, I think May 22nd. It came off compounding, right?
Yeah.
Donald Trump spoke about Ozempic. He spoke about one of those weight loss drugs. A friend of his was in London and bought it for $38, and the cost here in the United States for the same dosage was $1,400.
Yep.
Can you walk me through, do you sell Ozempic at your pharmacy?
No. I mean, we do.
Right.
We had the compounding. When we were doing compounding, we did a lot of that. But now that it's off compounding, the brand is the only one that's available right now. Right. And we get the full retail price. In our insurance system, there's this nonsense retail price that we start with, and then insurance cuts that in half, basically. But since I don't take insurance, I don't get that special half price. I get the real deal price. So if somebody was to buy Ozempic at my pharmacy, it'd be like $1,200 a month.
And all right, so it's about $1,200 a month if they wanted to buy it at your pharmacy.
Yeah.
And that would cost you $1,200 to buy it.
Yeah.
So you're not making any money except, is there a dispensing fee for you? Do you get anything?
Yeah. So our model is called cost plus. So that means that I buy the drug, I charge a 15% markup on that cost, and then I have a $10 dispensing fee. That's like for the labor.
So if Ozempic is $1,200, you would have to charge $1,200 plus 15%.
Plus
right,
$10.
So another $180. So $1,380 and $10 for the fill to hand it to the patient.
Yep.
So you would charge $1,390.
Mm-hmm.
But now what if I went to a pharmacy that accepted insurance? What would that cost me there?
Well, then you're getting your insurance price, which could be anything. It could be, you might be in the donut hole and you're paying for the full thing, which would be like $600. You might have it on tier 1 or whatever, and you're paying $30. That they use the copays to manipulate you, so they're unpredictable.
Now, what role does the PBM play in all this? When I think people really don't understand the roles of PBMs, because, and I have to tell you, I've been doing healthcare fraud for 30 years, and I brought one of the first PBM cases, the Medco case. And since then, I've been involved in other PBM cases. I've been involved in GPO cases. A GPO is a group purchasing organization. The government has tried many times to bring transparency to this system. And every time they try to bring transparency, the PBMs add another layer of corporations. I looked at a chart after I got off the phone with you. I pulled up a chart, and it was run by an organization of American pharmacists trying to explain to independent pharmacists how this system works. It was unbelievable. I mean, there was a chart, and it starts on one end with the manufacturer. It goes to the other end with the patient. And for that drug to get from the manufacturer to the patient, it not only had to go through the chain pharmacy, the wholesalers like McKesson and companies like that, then the PBMs. Then the PBMs have these other spin-off companies that they use to add other fees and hide other fees. What is your take on the PBM industry and its relationship to big pharma? I mean, there's so much co-ownership now. Where do you draw the line? I mean, what is your take on all this?
The PBMs and big pharma is a confusing relationship because they go at each other as though they're enemies. But in reality, they work together to raise the cost of the medication. And that's because the PBMs were granted one special power that gives them the ability to do everything that they do. And that's that they have carved out special privileges that exempt them from anti-kickback statutes. And that's what allows the rebates to happen. So because they have exclusive ability to negotiate the rebates in the whole country, I can't get those rebates, like I said. Only the PBMs can get those rebates. Since they have that power, that's why we have this system where everything funnels through them. All prescriptions run through them because if you're getting a brand med, it's going to cost you exorbitantly above their costs to get it without them. So because of that, they are able to sell their services as a price savings service. They lower the cost of the medication. That is their fundamental role. But they have to improve every year because they're corporations, right? They have shareholders that they have to meet, and they have to be able to show them that they've improved. So in order for them to improve, they have to save more money. How do you save more money? Well, it's hard if you're going to keep lowering the cost of medications. What you can do is you can get them to raise the cost of medication. Then the amount that you're saving has grown, even if the actual cost of the medication has also gone up. So as we've got these rebates, that's given them the power to pressure the manufacturers to raise their cost so that they can then save more money for everybody.
Now, CVS owns Caremark, and they're responsible for about 80% of all the prescriptions written in this country. CVS is the retail pharmacy. Caremark is the PBM. And I'm looking at a CNBC article that says they administer approximately 80% of all prescriptions in the United States, according to CNBC. Does that make sense? Does that seem right to you?
I think they're about 30%.
Yeah, it seems a little high to me too, but I'm looking at this article.
80% for the big three PBMs altogether. The big three are 80%. CVS individually is 30%.
I think I agree with you. I think this article is incorrect. But what do you do if you're president of the United States? How do you fix this? I mean, it's just crazy that with no insurance, if the U.S. government filled all their scripts through your pharmacy, they would save, what, $1 trillion? Some crazy amount of money?
Yeah, I've done 40 drugs and it's $15 billion. So I don't know what it would give.
So you looked at 40 drugs.
Yeah.
And if the government simply paid the retail price for these drugs, not mediated through a PBM or a cell phone pharmacy /PBM /manufacturer, on those 40 drugs, they would save how much money?
$15 billion.
$15 billion a year. Yeah. Every year, just on 40 drugs. Now, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of drugs that are commonly used. In the course of, how many different drugs do you think you stock on an average monthly basis? How many different types of drugs? Do you stock 500?
Yeah, at least.
Is it more than that?
Yeah, probably more. Closer to 1,000.
Okay. But most of your prescriptions are for the same 100 drugs, let's say?
Oh, yeah.
Does that account for most of it?
Yep.
So why doesn't this get fixed? Trump came out and wrote an executive order that said you can't charge Americans more than you're charging in foreign countries. But they are. Is anybody following that executive order, or are they just ignoring it? How is that going to, how do you enact that? You write an executive order like that, which makes a lot of sense. But what happens now? What does CVS do? What are they going to do? How does CVS survive? And how does their PBM care mark make heads or tails of that? How they can't change those prices.
Yeah,
it's baked into the system.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to see how it connects with the PBMs, because really the solution is to get the rebates out of the system so that we're seeing the real cost of the medication. And if we get those out, then that means that the PBMs don't have nearly as much power to control everybody as they have right now. The most favored nation price is a good concept, but there is a couple loopholes in it that could be a problem. I think that they can pull it off. You know, it'll go to court, of course, but he's planning to use the FDA's ability to control which medications are available in order to pressure the manufacturers to offer those low prices. But one of the problems with the most favored nation price, this loophole that they have in there, is that they've stated that any drug with a generic or a biosimilar available is exempt from the most favored nation price. And that's a problem because we still pay for brand name drugs even when they have generic medications available. And in fact, we pay a lot for them. For example, generic or Lamictal, which is generic lamotrigine, is it's dispensed all over the place, a ton, millions of times. It's cheap. Medicare pays only like $15 to $20 for it. But the brand version, Lamictal, is still dispensed, and they charge $2,000 on each one of those.
Let's take this one again, because I think you switched it up. Lamictal is the brand name.
Yes.
And it's a drug called lamotrigine. Now, it's an epilepsy drug, and it's a bipolar disorder drug. Do you see it more prescribed for epilepsy or bipolar disorder?
I'm not sure. We haven't seen too much of this one. It was just one that I pulled out.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Lamictal is a brand name drug. Mm-hmm. It's prescribed, for people with bipolar disorders, prescribed for epileptics. There is a generic version of the drug. And you're saying what now? That the generic version is exempt from favored nation status?
No, the brand version will be exempt from having to meet that most favored nation price. So they'll be able to charge a full brand price. Because there's
why is the brand, I thought the generics were, okay, why is the brand exempt from favored nation status?
I think just because it has a generic. I'm not sure really why they built that loophole in. But if there is a generic available, the brand does not have to meet that price anymore. So it's only for exclusive brands.
So Lamictal is exempt. So any brand name drug, you're saying, any brand name drug that has a corresponding generic version, that brand name drug is exempt from favored nation status.
Yeah.
And favored nation status, for people who might not know what that means, it means that the U.S. government is supposed to get the cheapest price globally, so that an American citizen shouldn't be paying more than a citizen of the UK. That's what that means. So now let's look at Lamictal for a second. What does that, if there's insurance, what is Medicare paying for a monthly or 90-day? Do you price everything on a 90-day supply? Is that what you do?
No, I just do it per prescription, and then I look at the overall per beneficiary, and if it's like 3 or 4 times, then I assume it's...
All right, so let's talk about this drug. What did you find when you looked at this drug?
So Lamictal is dispensed 49,000 times, even though lamotrigine is available. So it's still dispensed somewhat regularly. Lamotrigine is millions and millions.
When you say 49,000 times, that's as an annual number of scripts written?
Yeah, per year.
So there were 49,000 scripts a year written for Lamictal.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't sound like a lot, 49,000 prescriptions for the entire U.S.
Right. Yeah, it's not. But it is significant when the price is $2,200 per prescription.
All right. So what is that? So what is the U.S.? So what are, all right. So what are the annual sales then for the prescription drug?
$108 million for the brand.
So $108 million for the brand.
Mm-hmm.
But what would it cost me if I bought the generic?
Even Medicare is only paying $15 to $20. We're at $11, but Medicare has a great price on it, only $15 to $20. So it's cheap, it's affordable everywhere. But because of that loophole built into the most favored nation prices, we could still be paying these outrageous prices on brand name drugs just because there's the ability to be exempt from the price.
So let's stay with the Lamictal argument for a second. I can buy Lamictal, or I can buy the generic at your pharmacy.
Mm-hmm.
You have both.
Yeah, we can get all the expensive drugs. We just don't sell them very often because you have to actually.
So, which drug do you sell at your pharmacy? The
generic. Almost all generics. Yeah.
And how much does a prescription of generic Lamictal cost at your pharmacy?
$11.
$11. And what's Medicare paying for the same generic drug?
$15 to $20.
So they're paying $15 to $20 for a drug that you're charging $11 for. Now you're making a profit on the $11.
$10.
So you can sell this drug all day long at $11 and make profit. But the U.S. government, through their healthcare plan, is paying $15 to $20. And that continues day after day, year after year.
Yeah, for almost every drug.
Pardon me?
For almost every drug. I mean, I'll bet that there's, under 1,000 drugs probably for sure. There's probably 10,000 active drugs in the U.S. and definitely less than 1,000 of them are close to us in price. So I would say we're cheaper on almost everything.
And what do you think the justification is here? How does CVS, how does Caremark, the PBM, how do you turn to the American people and say this is how do you justify this?
There's no transparency in the U.S. We don't pay for drugs, we don't pay for healthcare, we pay for insurance, and then everything else is behind the scenes. So that's the problem with all these prices that I'm talking about. And we had it earlier in this conversation where there's two things that we're talking about with price: copay and then actual price. And the copay is the only thing anybody ever interacts with. The actual price, which is where all the money is, that's hidden. That's where all these costs get thrown in. And almost nobody knows what this actual cost is. That's how come.
Can you say that again so people really understand what you just said? That was important. Can you say that again?
Yeah. So there's two parts to the price. There's the copay. That's what you pay at the checkout. And then there's a back end cost that the insurance payer, that's either your employer or Medicare, it's the government. That's the big cost. That's where the rest of it happens. So when you run a prescription on insurance, you get your copay and then your payer gets a bill and they pay the real cost of the medication. And that's where the hidden costs are. That's where it explodes. That's where all my prices are so much cheaper than everybody.
So now this money goes to who collects that fee? First, it's the PBM, and then they turn around and pay it to the wholesalers, and the wholesalers pay it to the pharmaceutical manufacturers, correct?
No, that would be great because then I wouldn't have to be paying for it. But that's how they're able to run us out of business. I have to buy the drug. And then 6 weeks to 2 months later, then they pay me whatever they see fit. So that's where it's a big problem. But the money from the employer goes to the PBM, and then the PBM sorts it out with their calculus in there to figure out how much they want to give me, and then they keep the rest. That's I don't know if people know about spread pricing, but spread pricing is where they charge one price to the employer and then they pay a different price, and all that gap in between there, they just keep. And that's 10% of their income. They make 10% of their profit on keeping the spread in between those two prices.
Now, when you say they, you're talking about the PBM, or you're talking about the PBMs?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm looking at a chart, and I'm going to try to put it up for the website. And it's just a vertical, it's a list, it's a chart of vertical relationships between the insurers, the PBMs, the specialty pharmacies, the retail pharmacies, the mail order pharmacies. And it's unbelievable. You have relationships between Aetna and CVS, and you have relationships between United Healthcare and Optum Specialty Pharmacy and Cigna and Express Scripts and Walgreens. They all control the entire supply chain. So you have the pharmaceutical manufacturer who physically makes the pill. Then you have the distributors, the people like the McKessons of the world, right? And they physically transport the pills and deliver them to the pharmacies and the hospitals.
Yeah.
But then the money. So when I walk into not your pharmacy, because you don't accept insurance, but when I go to my CVS and I present my card, they say to me, okay, they look in the computer figures all this out and say, you owe X amount of dollars. That's my copay. And depending on my plan and the donut hole and all this craziness, right, they come up with a copay that I have to pay. But then behind the scenes, all of these complicated, almost impossible by design, relationships then trigger each other. And the people that are pocketing the money aren't even necessarily the manufacturers. It's really the middlemen who are hired to protect us. The original concept of a pharmacy benefit manager, the original concept was that you couldn't trust the pharmaceutical companies to do the right thing and that they were going to price gouge. So we're going to come in, you're an employer, and if you just send your patients to the local pharmacy, guys like Brad Hart and Forest Park Pharmacy, they're going to rip you off something terrible. So we're going to protect your employees from Brad Hart and his wife, and we're going to get in the middle of all this. And we're going to set the prices, we're going to do volume purchasing, and we're going to pass along the savings to you. And in this case, you is the U.S. government. So they sold the U.S. government on this concept that because of the PBMs, we're going to lower the price of prescription drugs in the United States. That was the concept of a pharmacy benefit manager. They were going to manage the pharmacy expenses that employers had to pay so that their employees could get access to the drugs that they need. And then the first deal that I had looked at, that was a pharmacy benefit manager called Medco, and they got purchased by a drug company, Merck, and they became Merck Medco. But then somebody figured out that really what we need to do is we need to own the pharmacy. We need to own the brick and mortar stores. So they started buying up brick and mortar stores. And then Caremark and CVS became one big company. But then they figured out that there's a better way to do it. We make more money if we can fill 90 pills at a time. But there's a better way to do it. We'll do it mail order. So we don't need a fancy store, and we don't need to sell greeting cards and canes and, over-the-counter drugs. We just want the prescription stuff. So we're going to open up these warehouse-type operations, and it's going to be mail-order pharmacy. And instead of having human beings like Brad and his wife looking at the pills, we're going to get these big machines that sort of fill the pill bottles. And I've seen them. I've physically been in some of these places, these facilities, where you have these machines that are 2 stories tall, and they're filling script pills and pushing them out the door. So then they said, well, we're going to own the mail order pharmacy. So they own the pharmacy, the mail order pharmacy, and then the local guy like you. I mean, what's happening? How many, just in Fort Worth, Texas, for example, when you started 2 years ago, how many independent pharmacies have closed their doors in the last couple of years, just in Fort Worth, do you think?
Oh, I can think of 5 off the top of my head. Our closest neighbor closed down. And so a whole load of patients came over because of that.
So your closest neighbor closed down. And what did he or she say to you when they closed their doors?
They couldn't mess with insurance anymore. It's the problem that's causing all of this to happen. There was a website that a guy put up that was a pharmacy shutdown tracker. and it just pulled like the data that shows you which pharmacies have closed. And last year, an average of 9 per day closed throughout the year, the whole year, an average of 9 per day. So that
9 pharmacies a day, 9 independent pharmacies a day in the United States closing.
Yeah.
9.
For an entire year.
9 a day for an entire year. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pharmacies closing. Yeah. And that really was the essence of the pharmacy business, of the profession. The profession wasn't really about putting pills in a bottle as fast as you can. The profession really was the doctor would write the prescription, have a relationship with the patient. The patient would then take the prescription to the local pharmacy. The pharmacist would then double check what I wrote, make sure I didn't make a mistake, suggest something better, cheaper, maybe something more effective for that patient, or say to me, these patients they're not filling your script. She can't afford it, or she's not compliant. And I'd have feedback, and I'd have some relationship with the pharmacist. Mm-hmm. And the pharmacist was a respected member of the community who was a medical practitioner. That's gone. That's just out the window. You go to a CVS pharmacy. Do you have any idea what I'm guessing? And I've asked CVS pharmacists this. How many scripts a day an average CVS pharmacy will fill? I think it's in the thousands, right?
I don't know.
Is it over 1,000 scripts a day? Is it 1,000 a day?
I don't know on average. I know a busy pharmacy, 500 prescription. That'll keep them real busy.
Well, that's a busy pharmacy, but most CVS pharmacies are bigger than the average pharmacy. They're like 2 or 3 times the size. Yeah, and the pharmacists barely have time to put the pills in the bottle, let alone control anything. So let's ask the $1 million question. 9 pharmacies, independent pharmacies a day closing because they can't make money, because they're paying more for the drug than they're getting reimbursed. So if I dispense a bottle of a drug and that bottle costs, and I'm making, $100 for that drug, I'm getting reimbursed $100. That drug's costing me $105. So I'm losing $5 in every bottle. So no business can. That's like McDonald's selling hamburgers and losing $5 on a hamburger. So how is it that CVS can stay in business?
Yeah, so
Caremark's the PBM, but CVS is making money. There's nothing but CVS's all over America. How does CVS make money, but your neighbor that closed down couldn't? What's the difference between them?
So like you were talking about that vertical integration where Aetna and Caremark and CVS and I forget the name of their doctor thing that they have going now. But they're all within the same company. So they're all paid by either Aetna or Caremark. And because of that, well, the incentives that they pitch are, we now control the provider so we can lower the cost. But of course, that's not what the incentives say. The incentives say, you now control the provider. You get to choose how much to pay. You're going to want the cost to go up. And that's exactly what's happened. They've wanted to raise the cost of care because they are the ones that get to pay for it. So the more that they pay, the more that they get to keep. And that's exactly what's happened with pharmacy. They pay CVS like 5 to 10 times as much as they pay the independent pharmacies. They don't charge differently. Like if they were charging payers way less to use an independent pharmacy, then independent pharmacy would be thriving and we'd all be saving money. But they don't change what they charge. They just change what they pay. So CVS is able to make a big profit on a prescription that would cost me money to dispense.
Because CVS controls the PBM that sets the prices for this drug.
Yeah, and physically pays it. Not only controls the price, but actually pays the pharmacy.
So how is that? Now, in America, we have a concept that monopolies are bad. When somebody owns a profession or owns a market segment, that's a monopoly, and they drive prices up and they drive the little guy out. What's happening right now in America to the independent pharmacists is they're closing at the rate of 9 a day. And you're saying because CVS makes more on a prescription than an independent pharmacist makes, because CVS is integrated and connected financially to the PBM that sets the pricing. And they have one price that they'll pay to their own pharmacy, and they'll have a much lesser price that they'll pay to the independents, driving the independents out of business, creating more market share for CVS. And 2 or 3 companies are doing this, and they control 3 companies control 80-90% of all the prescriptions in this country. So when price, now, what role does the pharmaceutical manufacturer have in all this?
Yeah, it's complicated because they make more money when it's more expensive, obviously. So the prices going up are good for them, but there's a problem, and that's the PBMs control the formulary. That's what prescriptions, or that's what medications are covered on any insurance. And it's fine if they are not manipulating that, but they are manipulating that, and they make deals with specific manufacturers in order to create exclusive categories for them. So, for instance, CVS just did this with Ozempic and Wegovy. They made a deal with Novo Nordisk. Novo Nordisk is going to pay them an undisclosed fee. These are always private, how much they get paid by the manufacturers. They paid them an undisclosed fee for exclusive access to GLP-1 weight loss medications. So now anybody that takes CVS Caremark will not have Eli Lilly because they didn't make the deal with CVS Caremark. So Zepbound and Mounjaro are off of the formulary for anybody on CVS Caremark. You can only get Ozempic. So by using that power, formulary exclusion, PBMs are able to pressure manufacturers to set the price that the PBM wants, even though the manufacturer actually has the power to choose the price. The power to be on the insurance is actually extremely strong and extremely influential to the manufacturers. There was a case, I forget specifically which one, but the God, who was it? I don't know. One of the manufacturers was testifying in Congress, and he mentioned that they lowered the price of one of their insulin products, and immediately it was dropped from all formularies. Now, when it gets dropped from all formularies, that means 90% of people are no longer getting it. So the market for that product vanishes overnight. So then they just have to stop making it. So lowering the cost of the insulin wiped it out entirely, and they had to go back.
So what do insulin-dependent diabetics do to get insulin at that point?
Then they have to get the more expensive one only on insurance. So then the pressure to remain on insurance is even greater.
Because you have a lot of insulin-dependent diabetics that go to pharmacies to get their insulin. So you're saying that the manufacturers of insulin made it not available if you wanted to pay cash for it or generic. What was the? Explain that one more time.
Yeah,
How is it that?
So they lowered the cost of one of their insulin.
They who?
The manufacturer.
The manufacturer. Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
They dropped it down to like $30, but because that was so low, the PBMs couldn't save money for their patients at that price because it was already cheap. So they dropped it from the formulary. So the only available products for the patients on their formulary was the alternative, which was much more expensive.
And what is the alternative to the $30 insulin?
Just whatever their main insulin.
Another insulin, but just a more expensive version. All right, so they still get insulin,
right?
But they couldn't get the generic, less exposed. All insulin is generic, isn't it, or not? I guess there's brand insulins out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's really a fiction. President Biden used to get out there and say, "Well, I've lowered the price of insulin," but that's nonsense, right? We're still paying fortunes for our drugs that no one else is paying. Remember the Biden administration made a big deal about lowering the price of insulin, and they must have mentioned it every time he talked about the pharmaceutical industry. But they really didn't lower it for most people. For most people, because it's off the formulary. So if I go to a pharmacy and I need insulin, if it's not on my formulary, I have to pay out of pocket for it, correct? If I want an insulin, so the pharmacist is going to say what to me? I can fill your prescription, but I have to give you a formulary product, not a product that's off formulary because I don't carry it anymore.
Yeah, your insurance won't cover it except for this one particular product.
And those are the deals that are made, what are not disclosed, between the manufacturer of the product and the PBM?
Yeah. Exactly.
which is also now the pharmacy.
Right. And the
So the
insurance.
PBM, right. So it's so inbred that if you're a drug manufacturer and CVS has 4,000 pharmacies in the United States, Caremark and CVS is a huge powerhouse, right? Because, 4,000 pharmacies is a huge amount of pharmacies. And if I'm the manufacturer and I want to sell my drug, I need access to those 4,000 pharmacies. Mm-hmm. But they will extract a tremendous price from the insurance because it's the insurance is paying for it, not the typical American walking in. He pays his copay, which could be nothing or it could be a lot. Now, there's a lot of people who can't even afford their medicine. For example, Repatha is an example. That lowers your cholesterol, and I believe it's an injection. Now, do you carry Repatha in your pharmacy?
No, I mean, we can buy it, but we don't have it. Nobody has ever bought it here.
So if somebody needs Repatha, they have to go to one of these CVS pharmacies.
Yeah.
But it's like $1,400. That's some crazy amount of money for Repatha. Mm-hmm. So where does that leave? How is it that these aren't monopolies and the Department of Justice doesn't say, this is crushing an industry, this is driving prices way up for the American consumer. There are millions of people in Medicare benefits. Medicare, that money is being funneled through inbred relationships where the pharmacy and the pharmacy benefit manager are now the same company, which is like hiring a fox to guard the hen house, right? That's what you're doing. The pharmacy benefit manager was supposed to be the person that protected you from outrageous costs, drug costs, that they were going to apply metrics and logic and leverage large amounts of purchasing. And so the government then trusted these PBMs to say, okay, we're the United States of America. We pay for lots of drugs. We have millions of people we collect benefits on that they pay for Medicare, and we're going to give Medicare benefits back. And we want to spend that money wisely. So we're going to go to you, Mr. PBM, to help us save money on the prescription drugs. But in reality, those PBMs have inflated the price of those drugs dramatically. And not only inflate them, but manipulate the price of those drugs, so much so that the average independent pharmacist is going extinct, and the ones that are in business have to lie to their customers, lie to their patients, and say that products are not in stock, when in reality, they could get that product, but they're forced to sell that product at a loss. So in order to save their own store, well-intentioned pharmacists, these are good people. Nobody goes into pharmacy because they want to hurt people. They want to help people, and they want to own their own business. It's a great American dream, right? To own your own business, be a professional. But these people are now forced to lie to their patients or go out of business. And the people that are pushing them into that position are these monopolies that are being created, and the universe of American pharmacy is being carved up by three companies. And the Department of Justice has the ability to break the back of that, but so far they haven't done that. And I don't think they're not doing it because they don't really want to. I don't think the DOJ truly understands at this point the system. I mean, the people in the DOJ, who individually, how many people have you met? And you're out there talking about this to hundreds of thousands of people. How many people that have you personally met that really understand this stuff, really understand it cold?
No, zero.
Zero.
Yeah.
And look, I have to tell you something, and I don't like toot my horn about anything, but I'm a bright guy. I have a high IQ. I have 30 years of investigating this industry. And I have to tell you, I look at it and I'm confused myself. And that's the purpose. That's exactly the point. These relationships, there really needs to be, we talk about the border czar, and we talk about this czar and that czar. This is beyond, somebody like Dr. Oz who comes in, he's the head of CMS services, so the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, basically America's insurance plans, right? And he's in charge of all of that. But there really needs to be like almost a Doge type group in the government that coordinates the Department of Justice and CMS together to use the legal power of the Department of Justice and the intelligence of someone, the Doge mindset, to look at this system and say, you know what? If Brad Hart at Forest Park Pharmacy can sell a prescription and he can sell it for $96, why is the American government paying $3,400? That's outrageous. And here's the problem. Everybody in America, and it's funny because people, even in my own family, they think I'm conservative and all that, but I believe that America as a nation should provide health care to every U.S. citizen. I think it should be a right of sorts that no one in this country should go without a life-saving med. I really believe that. And maybe that sounds radical and it's not exactly what conservatives want to hear. I don't really care. I'm not one or the other. I'm a common sense human being. But let's go back to the cafe. Everybody in this cafe should get a free cup of coffee. They should get coffee to drink. And the coffee is the best coffee in the world. But in this particular cafe, as in your drug, coffee is $3,400 a cup, where you sell it for $96 a cup. That's what's broken with the American healthcare system, Brad. It's simple. Something either costs $96 or it costs $3,400. But you can't have those two prices. That the existence of that is exactly what's wrong with the American healthcare system. And Dr. Oz, hey, if you're listening, or Pam Bondi, hey, if you're listening, there is an antitrust division at the Department of Justice. That's all they do is antitrust. And they're all worried about, the Yahoos of the world and the Googles of the world because, the antitrust. But the PBM industry is strangling American healthcare. They're strangling it. They're raping it. They're destroying it. They're killing it. They're killing independent pharmacies. They're hurting human beings. They're keeping honest, decent working people from access to their medicines. There is no reason in a free market like the United States that Zytiga, that the American government is paying $3,400 for 180 pills, and I can buy it at your Forest Park Pharmacy for $96. Now, I don't know a lot, and I don't know the answer to everything, but I know that that's broken. And that's what has to be focused on. Why is it that American government is paying $3,400 for something that I can buy from your pharmacy for $96, and you make a profit at $96?
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
So what the heck is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What do you say to that, Brad?
Yeah. So
Isn't that the essence of it?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I think it goes back to their ability, their exclusive legal right to negotiate the rebates is what has caused all this. That's where it all went haywire. If they get rid of that, everybody else can solve the problem. We don't have to, there's all kinds of legal things we could do. There's all kinds of other stuff we could do. But if they got that one legal restriction, I'm excluded from participating in that side of the market. Nobody is allowed to except for them. If we got rid of that one thing, that could really free up so much. But like you said, $3,400, that means that you have to have insurance until somebody sees that it costs 96. But they use that higher cost as leverage to scare people into needing insurance. You'll go bankrupt if you don't have insurance. Look at how much it costs to get your cancer medication, $3,400, you know? They use those high prices as a scare tactic to make people need insurance. And it's just wrong.
I did an investigation years ago, and it led to a criminal charge against the company. I don't even want to get into names, but it was a drug that was a liquid. And I had investigated the company, and one of the vice presidents admitted to me that their actual cost to make a vial of this liquid was 11 cents. And they had set a price with Medicare in the $400 or $500 range. And then Medicare paid 80% of that, you know. And that was the kind of markup that we're looking at. There was just a recent case settled. I remember I sent a copy of it to you. And this is the topic of another conversation where there's an average wholesale price. And a company had set the average wholesale price for a chemical. And there was just a recent settlement with the Department of Justice, actually. Average wholesale price. Do you want to just mention what average wholesale price is for a minute so people understand it?
Yeah, average wholesale price is a metric that we use in pharmacy, that PBMs specifically use in pharmacy as a starting point for their negotiation to lower price. So whenever they go to pitch a payer, like the government or your employer, they say, we're going to take the average wholesale price and then you're going to pay 80% off of that price. So you're only going to pay 20% of the average wholesale price. That's the kind of savings that you can expect from us. The problem is that average wholesale price is fiction. It's total nonsense. So this starting point is just la la land. Nobody pays. I can't even buy drugs at those prices. There's nowhere that sells them at those prices. And we use that as the starting point, the foundation of our stuff. So it's what caused a ton of these problems. Abiraterone, for instance, I think I got it here. $11,000 AWP.
Unbelievable. I'm looking here. There was a settlement with the Department of Justice in November of 2024, November of last year. And this had to do with compounding drugs. And I do want to mention compounding for a minute because people should understand the difference in a generic and a compounded drug. A generic drug is basically the name brand drug that's off patent, and it's exactly the same chemical structure supposedly as the brand drug, except it's made by companies other than the company that got the original patent, and it's called a generic version. I think everybody's familiar with that. A compounded drug is when a pharmacist takes the elements of what's in a generic drug and mixes them together in his pharmacy, literally in a pharmacy, and mixes it together and adds things to it that are unique. So you can add B12, for example. People were adding to the GLP-1s. They were adding B12, and compounding pharmacies were selling that. Now, the Department of Justice settled a case against a company called Mediska last November. And they paid a $21 million and change fine. And what they did, according to the Department of Justice, and I'm reading this right here, Mediska acquired a drug, resveratrol, from the manufacturer, and it cost them 37 cents a gram, 37 cents for a gram of the drug. But then they repackaged that same drug, and they sold it for $2 a gram, for under $2 a gram. Okay, not so bad. You buy it for 37 cents, you sell it for $2. However, Mediska reported an average wholesale price. Now, they're selling it for $2 a gram, but the government is going to pay a percentage of that average wholesale price, which is set by the companies. It's the honor system. So what did they set it for? Do you have any guess? You want to guess what they set it at? Remember, they paid 37 cents.
$15.
They sell it for $2, but they're giving an AWP, so then pharmacists can get reimbursed a percentage of that AWP. The AWP they reported for that drug, they paid 37 cents a gram, was $777 a gram. 777. How they came up with that number, I don't know. It's a biblical number, by the way. It's the perfect number of God. But so they created a spread, a profit margin of $775, which was used by a pharmacy customer in a compound prescription. So they were doing this because compound pharmacies would then bill Medicare, and they're allowed to bill Medicare a percentage of the AWP, not what they actually paid. So I'm a compounding pharmacy, and I put this chemical into my compounded drug, and I'm telling Medicare that the AWP for this was $777 a gram. So I'm getting reimbursed some percentage. What is it, like 50% of AWP or something, or
20%?
20%. So I'm getting 20% of 777, but I actually only paid $2. See, so this is the craziness. Now, for some reason, the Department of Justice went after this company, and they said this was a fraudulent pricing scheme. But what I don't understand is what's the difference in this and everything else that you're telling me about?
Exactly.
Why is this a scam? And this gets prosecuted by the Department of Justice, but you're selling Zytiga for $96 and Medicare's shelling out $3,400.
And the AWP is 11,000.
You know, yeah, I did a case against a drug company once, and it ended up in Brooklyn court. And the judge, God bless him, it was a nice old man and a federal judge. And it had to do with a drug company paying kickbacks to doctors to prescribe a drug that really was dangerous. And the drug saved lives, but, you know, if you overused it, it also can hurt people. Like any drug, it should be prescribed for medical necessity and not for profit, right? So we proved that the company was bribing doctors. And one doctor in New Jersey, for example, in 1 year got $1 million kickback from this company just because of the drugs that he prescribed, which is a lot of money when you're paying a doctor $1 million. And this doctor is supposed to be prescribing. But I remember what the judge said, and it always stayed with me. So he looked at the facts of the case, and the U.S. attorneys were there, and the defendants were there, and they had flown in wherever they came from. They're from California, I think. And everybody's in Brooklyn federal court. And he says, okay. So he said, you bribed a bunch of doctors to overprescribe drugs just because you can make a lot of money. Medicare paid a fortune. The company was paying like $700 million in change in fines. He said, so who's going to jail today? He said. And they looked, and the U.S. attorney said, nobody, Your Honor. And he said, nobody's going to jail for this. And then he said, okay, who at the company, the drug company, is losing their job today? And U.S. attorney said, we don't know, Your Honor. He said, so you're telling me no one's going to jail and you don't even know if anyone's losing their job? And that's the problem. Okay? That's the problem. This is a scam. This is a scheme. We want to go after criminals. And I think America knows it. I really do. I think, you know, that kid Luigi, when he shot that man in the back, that was a terrible thing that kid did. And I'm not saying it was a good thing at all. But there was a phenomenon that happened. You seeing all these people supporting him. They say, well, the guy who got shot in the back, he deserved it. He was a bad guy. No, he didn't deserve it. And I'm a Christian, so I don't believe in violence or hurting anybody. But it just goes to show you that this is an issue that's right under the surface of the skin. This is a cyst in the American body. This is a boil. This is something infected and purulent, means filled with pus. And this is vile, and this has to be fixed. And it, you know, when you have the one thing I was interested when you're fixing somebody's, you have a cyst, right? I started my life in general surgery as an intern at a hospital, and you get these big cysts and you see this big thing bubbling. It looked like a volcano ready to explode. And you stick a scalpel in it and then poof, it all comes pouring out, right? This reminds me of that. this system, the PBMs, being financially connected or owning the pharmacies, and there's 4,000 of them, dictating prices, manipulating pharmacies, pharmacists, making honest people lie just to stay alive, telling people we're cutting the price of insulin, but meanwhile they're charging, a gram of something that's 37 cents, and they're telling Medicare it's $777 and getting away with it. All right. In this case, they didn't, but there's a million things like this. This is a problem so unique. It's an American problem. This does not happen in other countries at all. That's why Donald Trump could say that he had a friend in England who went to the pharmacy and paid $38 because every pharmacy there is like you. They buy it, they sell it for a little profit and whatever's reasonable, and everybody goes home and everybody's happy. This is the evil when you have a third-party system, because people say, I'm only paying the copay, so what does it matter? Well, it matters because they're bankrupting America. It matters because when you're charging the government $3,400 for a drug for 3 months supply, where you're charging $96, you're charging $32 a month for a drug. America's paying $1,100 a month. You're charging $32 a month. They're charging $1,100 a month. They're paying $1,100 a month. How many more Americans could get benefits? How many little old ladies who get the drug that they want get that drug if we just had a system like every other system in America for a loaf of bread? A loaf of bread doesn't cost $1,000 at one store and $3 at another store. It just doesn't. So why are our drugs handled this way? This has to be stopped. The people that can stop it would be CMS, right? Because they're paying these bills, and the Department of Justice, because they're the ones enforcing the laws when they're broken. The laws are all over the map. These people have co-opted the prior administrations, co-opted them. And this has to stop, man. This can't go on, Brad. This is crazy. Not only will we go bankrupt, but people aren't getting the drugs that they want. There's lots of Americans now who go up to that pharmacy counter, you've seen it, and they can't even afford the copays anymore. So they just don't fill the script. And they can't do it. They just can't fill the script. It's too expensive. And they go without. And see, that's what bothers me the most. Why should anybody in this country go without a medicine that they need? We're the richest country in the world. Everybody is entitled to get the drug that can help them. I believe that one way or another. And I'm not a socialist at all. But God darn it, this pricing system is criminal. It's criminal. And the people in the government that have the power to stop it, you want a czar? Get a pharmaceutical reimbursement czar. Get somebody who just fixes this system and brings some sanity. And you know what it's like? It's like that boil. It's right under the surface. And I think that Luigi fella, that proves how infected this is. There's twisted people out there that say the only way we can fix this is by killing people. And that's not true. That's the wrong approach. But what does that tell you? That this is building up. It's the pressure of this is driving people crazy. And someone's got to stick the knife in, open this thing up, get all the evil out, clean it out, open it up to the sunlight, right? Do you remember how you used to solve infections before antibiotics? Expose it to the fresh air and to the sun, and that would sterilize a wound. That's what has to happen here. This is like a wound that needs to be lanced, and that's what this system is. This is just crazy, nasty. You see it. That's why you're getting why you're going viral. Why? Because you hit something. You hit a core. There's an American zeitgeist. There's an American mindset that knows that this is broken and this needs to be fixed, and people are really angry at it. And I think you tipped into that. I think you You tapped into it, and God bless you for doing it.
Thank you.
Maybe you should be the czar. I mean, seriously, I'm not joking. Maybe somebody like you should go to Washington, and you should bring some sanity to all of this. And, if companies like the PBMs and Caremark can't make a profit without price gouging, then maybe they shouldn't be. Okay, I'm a capitalist, but if you're stealing money from the American government, and this old people, Medicare is a lot of elderly people, you're hurting the most vulnerable people in America, profiteering off of them. That's what the DOJ should be worried about, protecting these folks and protecting the system. Otherwise, the system implodes on itself. And we're talking a dozen companies that are, I mean, how many PBMs in America that matter? There's 3 that control 90% of the market. So we're talking about rating in 3 companies and maybe 4 or 5 pharmacies. That's it. You could change America just for that. If Donald Trump can solve the problems in the Middle East, and he can solve the Ukrainian-Russia war, and he can get all that done, and he's doing tariffs with all these other companies, all these other countries, then drag these people into the White House and sit them down in a room and say, you're not leaving until this is fixed. And if you're going to gouge, here's the Department of Justice. So you can either go here into the room where we're going to make deals with you, or you're going to go here into the room where you're going to become a defendant. You can become a defendant, and we'll just come after you all. But something has to happen. This is unsustainable. And God bless you for, telling the world about it. All right. So again, Forest Park Pharmacy, it's forestpark.pharmacy. Is that how to get to your website?
Yep.
And you're in Fort Worth, Texas. God bless Texas. I love Texas. It's a great state. It's like all the sane people left the rest of America. They all moved to Texas, But good for you. And you keep up the good work, and give my best regards to your wife. And hopefully we'll talk again.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you having me. Love it.
Oh, God bless. Thank you.